All right, right triangle trig. We're going to kind of refresh our memories from right triangle trig that you guys learned in geometry and also went over it in Algebra 2. But if you're given a triangle, how can you tell by looking at it that it's a right triangle?
It has a box.
Okay, it's got the box in the corner, right? A right triangle picture will have a box in the corner. It doesn't matter how much it looks like it should have a box in it. If a triangle does not have a box in the corner, it is not a right triangle. You cannot just assume that it is. But given that you do have a right triangle, you're going to be given an angle that is going to be called theta. We use that as a reference. You should be able to identify sides of triangles in reference to theta. In a right triangle, the longest side is always across from the right angle. That's the hypotenuse. In reference to theta, the side across from theta is the opposite, and the side that's right next to it or touching is the adjacent. All right, the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. We use that to find the legs or hypotenuse of a right triangle, only a right triangle. So in this case, your hypotenuse is always C and your legs are A and B. It doesn't matter which one you put A, which one you put B. It just has to be that the legs are A and B and the hypotenuse is C, okay? Now, you guys are familiar with these top three ratios. Sine, cosine, and tangent. SOHCAHTOA. You guys have all heard that before. I know everybody in here. SOHCAHTOA. That's your mnemonic device to remember sine, cosine, and tangent. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. But now we're going to talk about their reciprocal functions. What does it mean if something is a reciprocal? Not exactly opposite. It's flipped, okay? Because on your calculator, there's a button. There's a button that says, like, sine on your calculator. And then above it, it says sine -1. Those two are opposites of each other. Those are inverses. That's called arc sine, right? That is not the reciprocal function. They're not the same thing. So you guys need to be very aware of that. We're going to get into arc sine and stuff like that later. But right now we're just talking about sine, cosine, tangent, and their reciprocal functions. So the reciprocal to sine is called cosecant. It's CSC. The reciprocal to cosine is secant. It's called SEC. And then the reciprocal to tangent is cotangent. You guys have to know that. And when we say reciprocal, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so the reciprocal is flipped. It's the hypotenuse over the opposite. All right? So just, we need to know that. We're going to talk about that a lot in the next couple of examples. Here are the words, the spelling, if you guys have something like this on WebAssign. Instead of just the abbreviations, sine is SIN, cosine is COS, tangent TAN. Cosecant is CSC, secant is SEC, and cotangent is COT. All right, and then these are just talking about similar triangles that when you put their sides together, as they're a proportionate ratio, they're equal. All right, let's get into solving triangles, all right? You're going to be asked questions on WebAssign that says, what are the 6 trigonometric ratios? On your quiz, I'll probably ask you for 2 of them, so you'll need to know all of them and know which one's which. Now, there's 2 ways that the information will be presented to you today. One, where it's given a triangle that has all 3 sides, and one where you have to find a side. In this case, you're given the triangle and all 3 sides. So what I always tell everybody to do is highlight your theta. Because you don't want to flip your opposite and your adjacent side, because then 4 of your 6 trig functions will be wrong. Go ahead now and identify. I like to write out opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, so I don't have to look at the triangle again. I like to say, okay, well, my opposite side, my adjacent side, and my hypotenuse, all right? Those are the 3 things I need. And then I don't have to look at the triangle again. So in reference to theta, what is 3? Your hypotenuse, okay? In reference to theta, what is the square root of 5? The adjacent, it's next to it. And then in reference to theta, what is 2? Opposite. If theta was up on the top of the triangle, then your opposite and your adjacent would switch spots. So now this is the only information I need to look at. I can find my 6 trig functions without even having to look at the triangle again. You guys need to get in the habit of writing out sine theta, cosine theta, tangent theta. We'll write our reciprocals in a second. But sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so it would be 2 over 3, correct? Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so it would be the square root of 5 over 3. Tangent would be opposite over adjacent, so it's 2 square root of 5. Now, for webasine, this is okay. They will take that as an answer. Webasine, okay. You do not have to rationalize. But for me, is that an okay answer? No, you need to rationalize. You need to say, okay, I got to get that radical out of the bottom. So I'm going to multiply the bottom and the top by the square root of 5. So this becomes 2 root 5 over 5. That is the answer Mrs. Meadows wants. Webasine will allow you to leave the radical in the denominator, so that's fine. But on a test or a quiz, you guys have to rationalize. So now if we're going to do our reciprocal functions, reciprocal means flipped. We're going to do the flipped over functions. So what is the reciprocal of sine? It's cosecant. So cosecant of theta is what? 3 over 2. Good. The secant of theta is what? 3 over the square root of 5. For webasine, that is okay. But can you leave it like that for me? No. Rationalize top and bottom by the square root of 5. So it's 3 radical 5 over 5. You must rationalize for me. And then we have our cotangents. That means I take my original tangent and flip it. So it's the square root of 5 over 2. Everybody understand? The 6 trig functions are really, really, really important for you guys to memorize. We're going to use those a lot in the next sections. All right, let's do these examples. Again, you don't have to do this exactly how I do it. I just think the easiest way to not make silly mistakes is to write out what you have. The question says, find all 6 trig functions and the exact values. Exact means no decimals, guys. So in number 1, I'm going to go ahead and identify my theta. Here is theta. So in reference to theta, I need to find my opposite side, my adjacent side, and my hypotenuse. What is 13? Hypotenuse. What is 5? Opposite. And what is 12? Adjacent. All right, now that we have all that info, you don't have to worry about looking at your triangle again. You can just say, okay, look, I have everything written. I have my opposite side, I have my adjacent side, I have my hypotenuse. Now I can find all 6 of my trig functions. You guys are very familiar with sine, cosine, tangent. It's the reciprocals that you have got to get the abbreviations down for and the ratio. So if I'm going to find the sine of theta, opposite over hypotenuse, what is it? 5 over 13. Perfect. Go ahead and get the reciprocal out of the way. The reciprocal of sine is cosecant. What's my answer going to be? 13 over 5. Good. So now we're going to go with the cosine. What's the cosine? 12 over 13. Okay. So then my reciprocal is secant. What is that? 13 over 12. Then I have my tangent, which is what? 5 over 12. So my cotangent is 12 over 5. All right, that's super simple, super basic. You have a couple of your web assignments tonight. I think you have 9 questions. Not due till Wednesday because I knew you had a long one from last week. But there's only, it's very redundant, very basic.
The web assignment only has 9 questions?
Yeah, because they're long. There's like a bunch of parts.
Oh, I thought it was the one that was 35 questions.
That's due tomorrow, but that was assigned Friday.
Oh.
This is 5.2. That was 5.1. All right, let's look it over in number 2. How's number 2 a little bit different? There's an X. So we have to find one of the sides. This triangle is turned around, right? It's not like the other one was. So this is why I say it's really important to identify your theta. Here is my theta. In reference to theta, In reference to theta, what is 5? 5 is your opposite. What is 8? So we're going to find what? We're going to find the hypotenuse. All right, and it says exact values. That means no what? No decimals. So this is your C value. So I'm going to go ahead and say 5 squared plus 8 squared equals x squared. Could I have said 8 squared plus 5 squared? Yes, same thing. But I have 25 plus 64 equals x squared. What's 25 and 64? 89 equals x squared. So the square root of 89 is our x value, is our hypotenuse. Check to see if that can break down. If it can, great. If it can't, then just leave it. So here is the information that we have. We're going to use this to find all 6 of our trig functions. So my sine of theta is opposite over hypotenuse, 5 over the square root of 89. That's okay for what? Web sine, is that okay for me? No, so we're going to rationalize. It's 5 square root of 89 over 89. Now, you can go in any order you want. Some people like to find sine, cosine, tangent, and then the reciprocals. Some like to find the original function and its reciprocal. What is the reciprocal to sine? It's cosecant. So cosecant theta is going to be what? Square root 89 over 5. Perfect. So now let's go with cosine. So cosine theta, adjacent over hypotenuse. So 8 over square root 89. Problemo? Yes. So this becomes 8 radical 89 over 89. Check to see if the numbers on the outside simplify. If they do, then you have to simplify. Let's go ahead and find the reciprocal function. So secant is going to be the square root of 89 over what? Over 8. Okay, good. And then we have tangent and cotangent. So tangent is opposite over adjacent. 5 over 8. So my cotangent is going to be 8 over 5. Perfect. All right, moving along. Still dealing with the right triangle? Yes, we're still dealing with the right triangle. I know it's right triangle because that little square. So I'm going to look here and I just identify what I have and what I'm looking for. In reference to theta, what is 4? Okay. In reference to theta, what is the square root of 29? It's the hypotenuse. So I'm looking for what? I'm looking for the adjacent. I'm looking for a leg. In this case, I'm looking for an A or a B. It doesn't matter which one. I just know it's not C. So guys, this is a tad bit different. This is why I want to do this one. I have 4 squared plus x squared equals the square root of 29 squared. Well, 4 squared is 16 plus x squared equals. What happens when you square a square root? It cancels out. This is just 29. So now we're going to subtract 16 from both sides. X squared equals what? 13. So you take the square root. So your adjacent side is the square root of 13, right? This is a little bit different because we have 2 radicals here. Where can you not have a radical in your answer? In the denominator. If you have one in the numerator, it's fine. So let's talk about our 6 trig functions. We have the sine of theta. Sine is what? Opposite over hypotenuse. This is okay for web sine, but not for me. So we're going to rationalize. It's going to become 4 square root of 29 over 29. What is your reciprocal function? Cosecant of theta. It's going to be what? The square root of 29 over 4. Now, I know you guys get into the habit of sine, cosine, tangent. On your quiz, I'm not going to ask for all 6. I might just ask for 2 reciprocals. So you have to know the original function and what its reciprocal is on its own, not just because you do it in order all the time. So now we're going to go with cosine. So my cosine of theta is adjacent square root of 13 over the square root of 29. Huh. What do? Can I leave it like that? No, we're gonna rationalize. On the bottom, 29 times 29, right? Square root of 29 times square root of 29 is just 29. What happens when you have a radical times a radical, but they're not the same numbers? A house times a house is just a bigger what? Bigger house. When you multiply, guys, 13 and 29, what do you get? 377?
Yeah.
Okay. Gross number, but no biggie. Now I have the secant of theta. Well, that's going to be the square root of 29 over the square root of 13, right? Again, same problem. Can't have that radical in the denominator for Mrs. Meadows. So this is going to become the square root of 377 over 13. Because you rationalize, multiply the bottom and the top by the square root of 13. And then now we have our tangents. What's tangent? Opposite over. All right, so we're okay for Webasine, but for Mrs. Meadows, this needs to be 4 square root of 13 over 13. Our cotangent would be the square root of 13 over what? Yep. And again, this should be a big old review. All right, moving along. Let's look at this one. Same kind of problem. We're still talking about a right triangle. In reference to theta, make sure you know what you're looking at. In reference to theta, guys, what is 3? Sorry, square root of 3. Yep, it's my opposite side. What is 8? The hypotenuse. So we're looking for the adjacent. We're looking for a leg. So it doesn't matter if you use this as A or B. I'm going to say x squared plus the square root of 3 squared equals 8 squared. So I have x squared plus, what happens when you square a square root? They cancel. So plus 3 equals 64. What's x squared equal? 61, good. And then I'm going to take the square root. So my adjacent side happens to be the square root of 61. Always check to see if your radicals break down. If they do, fantastic. Simplify them. If they don't, just leave it. But now let's find our trig functions. I have the sine of theta is going to be the square root of 3 over 8. My reciprocal is cosecant. That's going to be 8 over the square root of 3. You can leave it like that for Webasine, but you need to rationalize on a quiz or a test for me. So it's radical 8 radical 3 over 3. Cosine of theta is going to be our adjacent, square root of 61, over hypotenuse. And then our secant is going to be 8 over square root of 61. Yes for Webasine, no for me. So 8 square root of 61 over 61. And then this one, our tangent's going to be a little yucky. Tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. So the square root of 3 over the square root of 61. When you rationalize, guys, what is 61 times 3? (61 times 3). What is it?
183.
So square root of 183 over 61. And then my cotangent is going to be the square root of 61 over the square root of 3, which when you rationalize is still square root of 183, but this time it's over 3. So again, you can leave radicals in the denominator on your Webasine work. But for a test or a quiz, you need to rationalize. Everybody with me? All right, last page, last 2 pages actually, is using the calculator. I'm not sure if we're going to have these on the quiz or not, but if you do see them on Webasine or if you see them on the quiz, I want you guys to understand. Again, I told you that on your calculator, you have a button that says sign. And then above sign, if you hit second and then you hit sign, you get sign -1. Those two things are inverses of each other. That sign -1 is called arc sine. Okay? We're going to solve equations where we have to use the arc sign to find angle measures and stuff. These are called reciprocal functions. These are not inverses. These are reciprocal. So you don't use this button to get arc sine on your calculator. You're going to hit the sine button, but it shouldn't say sine little negative 1. All right, you need to understand that, and you'll see this coming up. We're going to talk, instead of opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, we're going to talk about x, y, and r. But cosecant in your calculator, the way that you would figure this out is 1 over sine. Secant is 1 over cosine. Cotangent would be 1 over tangent. I'll show you how to do it. So, use your calculator, round to 4 decimal places. For tangent of 40, tangent is just a normal function on your calculator. Hit tan 40 and tell me what you got. 4 decimal places. 839.
8391.
8391. Perfect. All right, hit cosine 20. Not 0.9397. Okay, fine. Cotangent. You guys don't have a cotangent button. It is not second tangent. The way that you find cotangent in your calculator, a lot of you will have to put a parenthesis, but it's 1 divided by, then you hit tangent 14. Whatever the reciprocal of the function is. So since you start off with cotangent, the reciprocal would be tangent. So it's 1 divided by tangent 14. What do you guys get? Say it again. 4.0108. Thank you. Now, if you're not getting these answers, it's one of 2 reasons. 1, you're not plugging it in correctly, or 2, it could be because you're in the wrong mode. But when you get cosecant of 80, what do you think when you see cosecant? What is that the reciprocal of? Sine. So it'd be 1 divided by sine 80. What is that in your calculator? 1.0154. Okay, good. Let me see. All right, come on over here. Cosine 52. What is that in your calculator? Just hit cosine 52. 0.617. So 6?
No, it's 5.7.
657?
6.1.
5. 0.6157. All right, cotangent. How would you put that in your calculator? 1 divided by tangent 78. What are we getting? 2126. 2129.
2126.
Okay. What's secant the reciprocal of? Cosine. So hit 1 divided by cosine 34. 1 point?
Yeah. 206.
Okay, perfect. Good. Good. The second part of right triangle trig, we're going to get to probably Monday or Tuesday. It's going to be word problems and stuff like that. We're going to get to that next. I'm going to get through the rest of 5. I want to get through all of 5.3 in the next couple days, and then we'll come back to the word problems.